Hi, my name is IDY, and welcome to this edition of IDY on Sports. This is one of the most iconic images of the 20th century. Tommy Smith and John Carlos giving the Black Pride salute at the 1968 Olympic Games in Mexico City. This is an image that we've seen over and over again over the years. I had a chance to interview one of these men, John Carlos, and I asked him about this image and the protest itself, about the backstory behind this image. And what he said completely blew me away. He said something that I had not seen or read anywhere in the years that I've known about this image. He said something truly prophetic. So what did he say? Well, before I share what he said, let me give you a little bit of context about the image and what was going on at that time. Tommy Smith and John Carlos were part of a movement called the Olympic Project for Human Rights, OPHR, an organization that encouraged Black American athletes on the 1968 U.S. Olympic team to use the Mexico City Games as a platform for calling attention to injustices against people of color from around the world. Among the key tenets in the OPHR manifesto included ending apartheid in South Africa and banning the country from the Olympic movement, the hiring of more Black coaches for the U.S. Olympic team, the removal of Avery Brundage as president of the International Olympic Committee, who OPHR members believed to be racist and anti-Semitic, and the restoration of Muhammad Ali as the legitimate heavyweight champion of the world. Recall, just a year earlier in 1967, Muhammad Ali's heavyweight championship was stripped from him following his indictment for refusing to enter the Vietnam War, a conviction that the United States Supreme Court would overturn 3 years later by a unanimous vote of 8-0 in 1971. But that's a story for another time. Back to Mexico City and the men's 200-meter event. An event that was won by Tommy Smith of the United States, Peter Norman of Australia was second, and John Carlos, also of the United States, was third. During the medal ceremony, Tommy Smith and John Carlos started a protest. And this is what I asked John Carlos about. And this is what he said that completely blew me away. He said that when he was 5 years old, he had this dream that he was sitting on a piece of grass in a playground, and this crowd around him was cheering him on. But when he raised his left hand to wave back to the crowd to acknowledge the cheers, they started booing and jeering. And it's instructive to note that he didn't understand why he would raise his left hand because he's right-handed. But in any case, he wakes up from the dream, he's crying, he goes and he tells his father, and his father says, "Son, no one is going to boo you, everything is fine." Fast forward 18 years later at the Olympic Games in Mexico City, on the infield grass where the medal ceremonies take place, the U.S. national anthem starts to play, Tommy Smith and John Carlos start to protest, and following the medal ceremonies, the crowd starts booing and jeering. In other words, this dream had come full circle 18 years later, and that completely blew my mind. I had not seen or read about this anywhere prior to John Carlos sharing that with me. There is no account that I have seen that even gives any rendition of this version as it relates to this protest. And I thought that was just the most fascinating thing. The other thing he said to me that I thought was interesting was that his primary motivation for going to the 1968 Olympic Games was to make the medal podium so he could do that, so he could express himself the way he did. In other words, winning a gold, silver, or bronze medal was just a byproduct of making the podium so he could protest, which of course is what he did. Finally, I asked him how he thought history would judge this image. And he said to me, quote, "That event was a beacon for society. We went there, we ran, and we won. We went there to make a statement, and we did that. What was relevant was what you saw. This event was destined to happen." And of course it did. In 2019, the United States Olympic Committee inducted Tommy Smith and John Carlos into its Hall of Fame. My name is IDY. Thank you so much for watching this edition of IDY on Sports.